Communication. What does that word mean to you? One of my good friends, Meg, shout out, my fave girl, almost every time we talk, she says communication. Or communication is everything. And I've heard that before, obviously, but having her say it almost every time we talk has kind of started to make me pay a little bit closer attention to communication. And let me tell you that this girl's onto something, because legitimately everything is surrounded by communication. Communication is the center of pretty much everything. Every misunderstanding that you have with a friend, a spouse, a family member, a stranger is due to, generally, a lack of communication. If you think about it, without communication, what is there? There are assumptions, there are predictions, there are guesses, there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of variabilities, a lot of, is that even a word? Variabilities? Variables. And so when you think about it, when you don't have communication, you have assumptions. And as humans, we tend to make negative assumptions for other people. So if I'm not communicating to you how I'm feeling or whatever, you're going to make an assumption based off of your perception of reality. And generally speaking, it's going to be a more negative situation that you're assuming, a more negative situation than what's actual reality. So for example, let's say, here's a good one. I like to go to the gym. That's a stretch. I sometimes like going to the gym. And I notice other females staring at me quite often. And generally, because there's no communication, I don't say, hey, I noticed that you were staring at me. Is there a reason why? Or are you staring at me because I'm doing something incorrectly? Or are you staring at me because you want to learn about the workout that I'm doing? Since there's no communication, I make an assumption. Generally, my assumption is going to be they're staring at me because they're judging me. They're staring at me because I'm doing something wrong. They're staring at me because they need this machine. Something negative. When, in reality, after communication has happened, a lot of times I realize they're like, where'd you get those leggings? And I'm like, is that where you were looking at me? You were looking at me because you like my leggings? Like, the reality is such a positive thing, but my assumption is super negative. And yes, that is my issue. A lot of times has to do with where our insecurities are. However, it's also human nature. And so we have to fight that, first of all. We have to combat that desire to just assume something negative. We have to fight that and instead communicate. And in a way that's non-confrontational, because your assumption may be negative and the reality may be positive. So you don't need to be coming at the situation with this hostile attitude. You need to come at it with a neutral, open mind, neutral mindset, if that makes sense. So, and you think about relationships, like, and I know in my marriage that I have said a few times, and he has said a few times, like, I can't read your mind. And it's so true. We just totally assume that they're just going to guess what we want. We're just going to drop passive-aggressive hints here and there, and if they don't pick up on it, we're going to be upset. And that is not fair on either ends of the spectrum. It is not fair for us to just think that they can pick up on what we think are passive-aggressive, like, hints. Like, well, you should have known that when I said the trash needed to be taken out, that was me telling you to take the trash out. Like, no, you didn't tell me to take the trash out. You were saying the trash needed to be taken out. I assumed you were going to do it. Because there's no communication. So, I'm just curious, first of all, what communication means to you. How communication has, like, affected your life in some way. But also, am wanting to encourage you and invite you to focus on it a little bit. Because Meg has said the words communication, and communication means everything. In our conversations, it made me more aware of it and pay closer attention to it. And now I'm noticing all of these things that are totally, have been there the whole time. I just wasn't aware of them. And now that I'm aware of them, I can do a better job of communicating better. And not just with my husband, and not just with my kids, and not just with my friends, but also with strangers. With strangers, communicating like, instead of just assuming things, assuming they're judging you, assuming they're still using a piece of equipment, assuming that whatever, instead of making assumptions about other people, if we actually communicated to find out reality, do you understand how much less, is that the proper grammatical term? How much less miscommunications there would be in this world? Like, it's crazy. So just start to pay attention to your communication, how little you actually communicate and how often you are actually making assumptions about other people and other situations. When, if we just communicated, we wouldn't have to make any assumptions. So, I have been like all over the place with this, but I hope that it made sense at some point to you. And yeah, I'd like to talk more about it later, but that's what I have for now. And yeah, love and light as always.